Thought my heart was gonna give out. Her and another one was close enough I could have spit on them without trying.
That's scary. Buster gets excited every time Levi gets deer because he gets some treats.
Can you get my green bag out of the room?
It's coming. Good boy. Mars too.
Found the bullet.
Did you?
I just heard this solid thump down on the ground. Look at the fat.
Oh. So that's the fat I'll save.
Okay.
Ooh. That is cool how the heart just exploded.
Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather, and as you saw in that very long 2-minute intro, my husband Levi was very fortunate to bag another deer for us this season. So I have been wanting to take advantage of some of the deer fat that we genuinely just throw away every season. It feels like such a waste, and I felt like there has to be a use for it. Now I did a little bit of reading and read that deer fat has a really high omega fat content as well as ceteric acid content, and both of those things can contribute to the fat going rancid kind of quickly. And some people say that the ceteric acid also causes the fat to coat their mouth and leave just kind of a gross mouthfeel. This is something that I want to test out for myself and decide how we feel, because it seems that the internet is pretty equally divided on whether or not they leave the fat in their meat or use the fat for eating at all. I will say that there are some people, even if they don't eat the fat, they use the fat to make tallows and candles, and that sounds like an amazing idea to me. So we actually got a lot of goat tallow out of our goat processing a couple months ago. This is one of the jars here. It's very white, very clean, very beautiful, very good tasting. There is no kind of mouth coating, but they do have a different type of fat and acid content in the goat fat. And I have so much of this fat that I don't think I need to keep any of this deer tallow for eating purposes. I think I'm gonna use all of this tallow in soaps, and I think it's gonna be awesome because after chopping up the tallow and putting it in the crock pot, my hands are so smooth and buttery soft. I think it's gonna make a really great soap. So I've got my crock pot full of the tallow over here, and there's a couple different methods to rendering tallow. I have only rendered the goat tallow in the past, but it was such a success that I feel like I can share the process that I did with that tallow here, and that really the end outcome will be basically the same. So all I have done is chopped up the tallow into little pieces and placed it in the crock pot on low. I have read that you can use your meat grinder to get really small pieces, but when I used my meat grinder with the goat tallow, it really just bunged it up. It made the parts freeze up, and it was just kind of a mess. So it was worth just dicing with a cutting board and a knife and placing it in the crock pot. And in doing this, you want to get the pieces basically as small as you can within reason. This was a lot of fat. I wasn't willing to go super, super small. But basically, the smaller the piece that you have, the more tallow the pieces are able to release. So the surface area really helps contribute to the amount of tallow that you get at the end. So I have everything in here. It's been on low. I've stirred it well, and we're starting to get a little bit of melting action here, and that's really cool. You can see that some of the pieces on the edge here are starting to almost turn translucent, and this is good. This is the fat starting to melt and render. This is going to be an all-day process, so I'm going to be keeping my eyes on it, but it's going to take a while for this to render down. And in the meantime, I do need to go out to do my goat chores, but before we go ahead and do that, I'm going to get the venison jerky in the dehydrator. So right here I have 6 pounds, 10 ounces of the venison jerky cuts that I have marinated for a little bit over 12 hours. I'm going to place the recipe that we used for this jerky brine in the description box below. I will say that it calls for beef stock, and I didn't put that in. I felt like it would water the flavor down, and it didn't, you know, hurt the coverage of the brine at all. We got plenty of great coverage, and I'm just gonna lay these pieces flat out on my trays here. Okay, so the jerky is in the dehydrator at 165, and it should take about 4.5 hours to finish. So we'll check on that a little bit later, but I wanted to let you guys know that there is a lot of brine left over, and in my experience, it's not worth reusing for jerky. Maybe you could use it to marinate chicken or something like that, but it loses a lot of flavor. It's like the salts and things really soak up into the jerky, which is what we want, but it's not good to use a second time. Hello. So today is my birthday, and the only thing that I want for my birthday is for Christine, this goat right here, to not come back into heat. She's been so hard to breed. All of my older La Manchas really have been. And the last time she was bred was November 1st, and it's 4 weeks later now. So generally they will go into heat every basically 18 to 24 days. This is day 28, and I'm holding my breath a little bit, super hoping that she does not come into another heat soon. This is the last time that I'm going to be milking Margie until next year, though. She is definitely bred. I'm probably getting less than a cup from her right now, which is not her norm. Good boy, come on, Titus. Let's go. Come on. Hey, handsome. He's very new to the routine. Listen, that's my mama. She's right here. Look. actually 2 days worth of milk for us. I like to strain the milk every other day because it saves me on milk filters and a little bit on dishes. My milk can fits a gallon, so 1 day's worth is a little less than a gallon. It's actually quite a lot less than a gallon, so it works out pretty well. But our tallow over here is starting to do some exciting things, so let's bring you over here. All right. So we've got a lot already rendered, and this is really awesome looking. Super exciting. It smells nice and clean. It doesn't smell funny or funky or anything like that. This tallow here actually is reminding me a lot of the goat tallow that I did, which is a good thing. And when I bottled up that tallow, I actually did it as it looked like I had enough to fit in a pint jar. So it looks like there's quite a lot rendered in there right now, so I just stay on top of it and I'll strain it as needed. I think one of the concerns with tallow sometimes is allowing the cracklings to kind of cook in the tallow and flavor it in kind of an off way. So if I stay ahead of bottling up the tallow, in theory, I can stay ahead of that. So I'm going to ladle off some of the tallow now through one of my smaller milk filters, and this will take out any little impurities. All I'm doing with my spoon up here is just shifting around some of the little pieces of fat that haven't completely melted, just so the tallow can make its way down through the strainer. Actually, the filter that is in this small strainer, that comes with this small strainer, is one of my more difficult filters to deal with. They filter very well, but they almost do too well, because even with milk, they just stop up so easily and so quickly, and I have to go through them kind of quickly. So I've got another type down here. I'm gonna switch them out. These big ones, I get these at Caprine Supply online. It's not made for this, so I've got to kind of force it. Okay. Beautiful, isn't it? So this will solidify as it cools down, and this canning lid that I put on here, it should seal. I'm probably going to store this in the refrigerator and possibly even in the freezer, just because deer tallow can break down so quickly. I do have my goat tallow at room temperature though. So it's worth noting, now that we're talking about storing the tallow at room temperature, or any tallow at room temperature, from what I understand, as long as there isn't moisture like water inside the tallow, that it should keep pretty well at room temperature. If there's any water in it, that can contribute to mold, and that's kind of its own snowball of issues. So some methods for rendering tallow in a crock pot have you putting a little bit of water at the bottom of the crock pot, and you probably noticed that I didn't do that. And I also have the lid tilted a little bit with the wooden spoon in there, just so that any of the condensation that builds up does have a place to escape. Now, like I said before, I don't have a lot of experience with rendering my own tallow, and I don't have basically any experience with keeping tallow long term, but it's something that I'm aware of, and I wanted to pass that on to you. All right, so it's lunchtime the next day, and here is the deer fat that we got. Through the jar, it looks exactly like the goat tallow that we have. I will say, in taking this out of the jar with my spatula, the deer fat is a lot more like dense. This is, the goat fat is a little bit more creamy, while this is a little bit more waxy. I felt like it worked well to fry my eggs, and I'm gonna taste test these eggs that I cooked in the deer fat. And our jerky's done, and it came out really good. Looks normal. Whoop. So that's a great flavor. That's an excellent flavor. Delicious. It's delicious. And I don't get any weird greasy mouthfeel. Not that I wouldn't if I didn't consume this in quantity. Like, let's say I made a ground venison that was like 20% fat. At that point, I might realize it and I might regret it, but I am not sad that I did this. Now, I have no experience with either one of these fats in determining how long they're gonna last on the shelf. I'm testing that out with the goat fat, and I could easily test it out with the deer fat, and I think I will. And if you know anything about the longevity of either one of these fats on the shelf, please weigh in the comments below, because I think we'd all like to know. So the leftover bits in the crock pot, they're called cracklins. You can eat those yourself. I don't exactly know the process on draining those and seasoning those, so I'm not going to pretend like I know what to do there. But what I like to do is to let the crock pot cool down and let that fat, like the little bits that are left over in there, kind of solidify, and then I'll break it up and feed it to the chickens. It's really good for them.